Hi, I'm John from the Christian Century, and I'm joined today by one of my colleagues at the magazine, senior editor Elizabeth Palmer. Elizabeth is also our books editor, so we're going to be talking today about the book reviews that appear in the Christian Century. But first, Elizabeth, hello. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi. It's great to be with you, John, for this interview. Um, yeah, I live in Skokie, which is just north of Chicago. I have two kids. Let's see. I'm an ordained ELCA Lutheran pastor. I have a PhD in theology. I studied Luther and Kierkegaard. I sometimes find Kierkegaard hilarious, much to the amusement of my colleagues.
Who
And
who doesn't, right?
that's about it. Yeah, I love
Awesome.
books.
Yes, yes, and we will talk about books. But first, so you're a senior editor at the magazine. You're also the books editor. Could you tell us a little bit for those out there who probably most people don't know how a magazine is put together? What do you do at the Christian Century?
I do a lot. All of it is great from my perspective. It's fun. It's a really good job. Okay, so as books editor, I'm in charge of the books section. It's mostly reviews that I solicit from people. So a lot of books get sent my way. Some of them hard copies, and sometimes just PDFs or electronic versions of books. And I look through them all and decide what we'll cover in the Christian Century. And then I decide who is going to review each book. And I ask the people to write the reviews. I remind them gently about deadlines that are missed. I edit the reviews. And then I choose which issues those reviews go in. So I compile the review section and occasional other book-related content like excerpts. We like to sometimes excerpt from a forthcoming book. If it's something really exciting, we get to publish it before the general public gets to see the book. That's the books part. Oh, and I also do a weekly e-newsletter called Books Worth Reading. And that's a lot of fun, where I get to talk about the books coverage in the magazine and other book tidbits that arise in my life through the course of the week. As senior editor, I'm pretty much involved in all aspects of composing, editing, compiling, and producing the magazine. So I could say more about that, but basically from the words on the page to the art to which issues which things are in, to big picture visioning, I collaborate with other colleagues on all of these tasks.
Yeah, great. Well, let's just zoom in on the books editor part of your role. Um, each issue has a lot of reviews. They're really good. I wondered if you could just tell us about maybe a couple recent reviews that spoke to you, that you were really excited we got to run, that maybe you learned a lot from.
I really liked Jeffrey Johnson's review recently of a biography of Jim Thorpe, because I'm not a sports person at all. I grew up in a family where sports was not one of our values. And so I didn't know who Jim Thorpe was. I had never heard of him. And he was this amazing athlete from, a long time ago, and probably almost 100 years ago. He was like America's best. He was the world's best athlete, really, at the time, as far as people knew. So not only had I not heard of him, and I got to learn about him in this review, but I didn't know that he was Native American. And so the reviewer, Jeffrey Johnson, pretty much just tells the story of Jim Thorpe. So he kind of summarizes the biography and he assesses it a bit about some of the tensions in the book. But it's a really straightforward review. Reading this review, you get a little synopsis of the book. And I learned so much from it. I just loved it. Another kind of review that we sometimes publish kind of goes beyond the content of the book, and really, the reviewer really teaches you, contextualizes it in his or her own expertise. So one example of a review like this that I really appreciated that we recently ran was by Janine Marie Pitas. And she reviewed this Polish novel, which was then translated into English. It took the author 7 years to write the novel. It took 7 years for the translator to translate it. And it's like 950 pages. The book is called The Books of Olga. And I cannot summarize it here, but I will say it is a beautiful, lovely, wonderfully crafted review, because you get to learn about this novel, but you also learn a bunch of other stuff that Janine is putting in conversation with the novel. So those are two of my recent favorites, very different kinds of reviews.
Yeah, that's great. We have a couple of videos on this channel where I chatted with Janine Pitas about pieces she's written for the magazine. We didn't talk about that review though I also did love that review. I thought she did a great job on that one.
Yeah, wasn't it interesting? She
Yeah.
just brought so many threads, so many different threads from post-colonial theory and the history of Poland and Judaism and Catholicism. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so you receive a lot of books. We're seeing a tiny fraction of them behind you in the background here. And you make the decisions of which books the Century will review and which ones it won't. I'm sure at times those are some tough decisions that you have to make. I wondered if you could tell us about one or two books that unfortunately we didn't decide to cover in a review that you wish, oh, I wish we could have reviewed this one.
Yeah, I feel that way all the time, John, about so many books that kind of attach to books. So when you suggested that you might ask me this question, I went over to my little bookshelf on the other side of the room where I keep books that I have a sense of attachment to. And I just actually kind of pulled some off at random, some recent books that I will briefly mention. And there are different reasons why a review won't get in the Century. Sometimes I intend to send the book out, but I don't find the right reviewer in time. I might ask a few people and they say, no, I'm too busy, or I have a book manuscript due, I can't do it right now. Occasionally I'll find a reviewer and they don't follow through. So for whatever reason, these are books I would have absolutely sent out if I'd had the right reviewer. This is a little book about Ruth. It's in Yale University Press's Jewish Lives series. It's this beautiful sort of speculative reading it's a retelling of the life of Ruth. The author kind of gathers gleanings, as Ruth did, and puts together the story of Ruth. This book by Jane Brox called Silence. I love this book. I did not send it out, but what she's up to in this book is she's looking at two very different forms of silence: monastic silence and sort of its religious use throughout the centuries and ages. And then she also looks at the imposed silence of solitary confinement in prisons. And she kind of juxtaposes those two together in this reflection on silence. This book is from probably like 2019, The Satan. It's just what it looks like. It's all about Satan in the Bible, the Hasatan, the Satan, how God's executioner became the enemy. So I did not send this one out. I kind of wish I had. It's just like a straight biblical studies book on one particular theme. And the last example in that category is How to Hide an Empire. This is just a history book that takes one little slice of history, one view, one way of looking at history. And he's looking at colonialism, and in particular, like the U.S. territories, and sort of all of what parts of the U.S. or which parts of the world have historically been parts of the U.S. because of colonialism. And it's a lot. As you can see on the cover, I think you can see that. It shows the U.S. and then it shows all these little colonies around. So it's pretty thick. So I actually have not read it, but I'm keeping it on my shelf and hope to read it at some point. Sometimes we don't send a book out for review because we have excerpted from it. And there's so many good books, we don't want to double cover a book by both reviewing and excerpting. This is Gary Dorian's new book. We excerpted from it. I think it just hit our website, the article about Walter Fluker. And this book is so good. Like, I totally would have sent it out for review, but we excerpted it. Sometimes a book is too specialized or would appeal to a very small number of people. And this is an example of that. Inside the Critics Circle, book reviewing in uncertain times. Yes, that's right. This is an entire book about book reviews. So I feel like the audience for this book contains me and a few other people, but I didn't think it had broad enough appeal that I thought it was a good choice to send out. And then the last category I'll talk about, sometimes I get a lot of books on the same topics, and they all come in around the same time. And obviously I cannot send out, every single book on a particular topic. So one example is this book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing. I love math. I was a math major in college.
So was I. We're the two Christian Century math majors on the team.
I forgot that about you, John. Yeah. So I sent this book out for review. It's written by a mathematician about sort of the moral capabilities and meaning of math and ethics, so to speak. Around the same time, these other two books came in. that I did not send out, because it just, I would like the Christian Century to be all math all the time, or at least a lot of math, and you probably would, but most people wouldn't. So
it's a good thing we're not the only two staff members who make the magazine.
Indeed. So these are two similar books. They're really great. I could have sent either of them out, but I had already sent out the Francis Sue book. So those are just two of hundreds of examples.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through some of those. That's really interesting. Well, for those of you out there who are interested in Elizabeth's work and want to dive more into our book reviews, a couple links will be below in the video description. One is a review that Elizabeth herself wrote. She writes reviews from time to time, and a recent one is about the book He Called Me Sister. This is a book about the author, Suzanne Craig Robertson's relationship with friendship with a man on death row. And I will just point out, the author on Twitter said that this is her favorite review of her book, is the one that you wrote, Elizabeth. So everyone should check out this review in the link below. And then also, there'll be a link to sign up for the weekly newsletter that Elizabeth mentioned. She writes a weekly books worth reading newsletter, a lot of cool book-related tidbits in this email. And every month in that email list, we give away a free book. So this month, we're giving away Will Gaffney's lectionary, a women's lectionary for the whole church. So just by being on the email list, you're automatically entered every month to win the book giveaway. So you could win this book this month. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us about books in the century.
Yeah, it's delightful. Thank you for having me.